Hey everyone, and welcome to Faith Church. My name is Sam, and we are so glad that you have decided to spend your morning with us. If you're new, we want to welcome you to Faith Church. We are a community of broken people who are all on a journey towards Jesus. So no matter where you're at, you belong in the family. And we would love for you to head to faithauburn.info to fill out a connect card so someone can reach out to you. And follow us on social media by searching Faith Auburn on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. And if you're someone who is ready to partner with us financially, the best way to do that is by going to faithauburn.info and clicking the button that says give. You can give a one-time gift, or you can set up a scheduled regular gift as well. Without your generosity, we could not do what we do. So thank you so much for your generosity. Here's what's happening at Faith Church right now. First is first steps. Whether you've been coming for a few weeks, a few months, or even a few years, you might have some questions about Faith Church, and we want to answer them. Join us after the 9 and 11 a.m. service next Sunday, February 26th, as we answer questions like, what do you have here for my family? What do you believe? What makes this church different? To sign up, visit faithauburn.info. We look forward to seeing you there. Second is Easter for 508. On Saturday, April 1st, we are hosting a fun-filled family event where we have music, activities, food trucks, and over 20,000 Easter eggs for a massive egg hunt. Everyone is invited, so bring your friends, your classmates, your grandma, your mailman, everyone. It's gonna be awesome, but we need help to make it happen. So check out how you can help before the event happens on that day. And you can visit easterfor508.com. Third, special announcement from one of the overseers, Peter LaPlante. Check out this message right now.
Greetings, Peter LaPlante here with a quick update on our senior pastor transition process. Last week, an email was sent out to all contacts we have on file. And for the sake of those who were not included in that communication, we wanted to also make this public announcement. So allow me to read the email that was sent. Dear Faith Church family, the overseers would like to share the following update. As many of you know, in November of 2022, Pastor Doug announced he would be stepping back from the role of senior pastor. A search committee was selected and voted on in the November 13th business meeting to interview and make a recommendation from an internal candidate pool to the overseers. The pastoral search committee has concluded their interview process. They have made the recommendation to the overseers to bring Associate Pastor Matt Gies forward as the candidate for the position of senior pastor. The next step is for the overseers to interview Matt. Our plan is to conclude the interview process in early March, at which time we will provide an update to the congregation on or before March 5th. Our thanks goes out to the search committee members, Carrie Panapinto, George Bory, Robert Sudo, Barry McLean, Josh Strasser, Sue Prunier, Loxanne Mateo, and Renee Morin for their time and prayerful consideration. Sincerely, Lynn Farraco on behalf of the Board of Overseers. Robert Sudo, Roxanne Anderton, Linda Bory, Deb Davenport, and Peter LaPlante. Please continue to keep the whole process in prayer with us, for Doug and his new role, for Matt and his family, for the staff, that we would see God's will, and we would be right in the center of it during this season of change. Thanks and blessings to you all.
You complete me. Do you remember those words from the movie Jerry Maguire, if you've seen the movie? Tom Cruise tears in his eyes, comes home to his wife. You know, they were having some marital problems and considering divorce. But he speaks those words. He says, "You complete me." And then she says, "You had me at hello," right? How many of us would love to hear those words said about us, that we complete another person? Or how many of us have subconsciously thought that someone else completes us? Or that if we got someone else, that they would complete us, right? How many brides and grooms stand before each other on their wedding day and think these thoughts? You complete me, right? Our world is set up for couples. And if you're single, there's this pressure from all sides. There's the pressure from your parents who remind you that they want grandchildren and they aren't getting any younger. There's the pressure to bring a date to your best friend's wedding because you don't want to be the only person there who's alone. Right? There's the pressure from the church members when you go out into the lobby and you're mingling with people and they say, "You're still single? We got to match you up with somebody," right? If you're single for too long, you might start to feel incomplete. And the more incomplete you feel, the more inadequate you feel. So what do you do if you feel inadequate? Well, you change. You change who you are. Right? You start to change things about you. It starts with your dating profile. You exaggerate the truth a little bit in your dating profile, whatever it might be. Right? Studies say that 80% of dating profiles contain a lie. 80%. You change who you are to get more attention, to get more followers, more likes, right? You do it on social media. You put off the best version of yourself. So maybe it starts online, but then it moves into your offline dates. And you start to change the music that you listen to, and you start to change the interests that you have to please the other person. You dress a different way to impress. Maybe you start to do things that you were previously uncomfortable with, whether it's substances or sex, and you don't even recognize yourself anymore when you look in the mirror. You wouldn't admit that you've changed, but if you asked your friends, they'd say you're a completely different person. I'm saying all this because I've been there. I remember years ago being in my first long-term relationship. I had dated girls for a month or two, but it was never Facebook official. But my sophomore year of college, I met this girl in 2009, right? And we dated for about a year. And I didn't realize at the time how incomplete I felt in that relationship until, looking back. And I allowed her to change me. I would come over to her apartment and she would criticize my clothing in front of her friends, right? She'd make fun of the shoes that I wore and how I didn't know how to dress properly. She didn't like that I wore graphic t-shirts. It was some weird thing. She was like, "You don't wear that." She just wanted me to wear white t-shirts. I still remember that. It was the weirdest thing, but she changed me over time. My whole wardrobe changed to please her. The music that I listened to changed. The friendships that I had changed, and I changed who I was for her. Because I didn't yet know who I was. I didn't see how this unhealthy relationship, was changing me until I got out of it and I was able to look back. Some of you have been there. Some of you are there now. Some of you have rushed into a relationship because you feel incomplete. And some of you have believed the lie that if you just find another person, that they're going to fix you. They're going to fix the brokenness inside of you, the loneliness inside of you. And some of you have gotten into marriages believing the lie that your spouse will complete you, but you find yourself now in a marriage that you're constantly disappointed with. And your spouse isn't loving you the way that you need to be loved. They aren't completing you. So you start to wonder, maybe I picked the wrong spouse, and you're tempted to look outside your marriage to find the right person who's going to complete you like Tom Cruise. And some of you are divorced or widowed, and there's this massive hole in your heart. Because that person who once filled that place in your life now isn't there and you feel incomplete. So let me just say, whether you're single, dating, married, or divorced, we all feel this pull for someone to complete us. But I want you to hear this. Jerry Maguire is a liar. Jerry Maguire is a liar. In fact, if you watch the movie, the main reason he even proposes to the girl isn't about his commitment to her. That's not what he says. He says he can't picture himself without her. He actually is so lonely without her. And you see that in the movie. He's just this erratic character that's chaotic and just, he can't be by himself. He's lonely. And I think Jerry Maguire needed more than rushing into a marriage. He needed some time out from dating to recognize that no person could truly complete him. So I want you to turn to the person that you're sitting with right now. If you're watching this with someone, turn to them and say, you don't complete me, right? If you're single, next time you go on a first date, I want you to start the date out by just setting the rules on the table and just look them in the eye and say, you don't complete me, right? Okay, maybe don't do that. But this is a lesson not just for Jerry Maguire, but a lesson for every single one of us. And before we rush into a relationship, we got to recognize that no human being is capable of completing you. No human being is capable of completing you. Singleness is the stage where you learn this. It's the stage where we're most positioned to learn this lesson. So, here we are in week 2 of this series called Sittin' in a Tree. My name is Matt and I'm one of the pastors here at Faith, and this series is named after the elementary school rhyme that you learned on the playground when you were making fun of your friends, and let's say it together wherever you are. It starts off, John and Jane, sittin' in a tree, Kissing. First comes love, second comes marriage, then comes a baby in a baby carriage, right? For many of us, this was our first understanding of relational progression. Love, marry, love, marriage, baby. Those are the order and the steps, right? It seems simple enough, but as we grew up in this world, we realized that this order of things has become less of the norm. And so I just want to say that whatever the relational progression has looked like for you, we want you to know 2 things here at Faith Church. That first, God loves you no matter what your relational progression looks like. He loves you. He loves you so much. And because He loves you so much, He loves you too much to see you stuck in a relational progression that leads to more pain and suffering than necessary. And that's why last week we were introduced to a different, more comprehensive relational progression. And Michael Todd, in his book, Relationship Goals, outlines this progression. And it starts with singleness, and then dating, and then engagement, then marriage, and then love and children. And last week we were introduced to it, but this week we're actually going to dive into that first stage of the progression, singleness. And by singleness, I don't mean single and ready to mingle. I don't mean swiping left and right on Tinder, hooking up, friends with benefits, Netflix and chill, whatever, fill in the blank, right? I mean a singleness where you discover what we're going to discover today, that no other human being can complete you in the way that God can. And last week, we started the series off by asking the question, where can we find helpful advice for a healthy love life? And this world is full of all kinds of advice, but not all of it is very helpful, and not all of it's very healthy. And what we said was that before we go to Google, we got to go to God. We need to go to God. It's the first place that we should go. So whether it's about how to get someone to be attracted to you, or how to fix your marriage, or tips for the bedroom, we said last week that God's advice has enough spice. We don't need the spice of this world. God's advice has enough spice because God, He's the one that created the spice. He's the one that built love, romance, and thought up sex and created it. Those are His ideas. And He loves love. So we should go to God before we go to Google. So He loves this so much that He put a whole book in the Bible about sex and about romance and about love. And it's called Song of Songs. And today we're going to be in Song of Songs, chapter 1, verses 5 through 8, continuing off from where we were last week. It's a collection of songs celebrating romantic love. Throughout the ages, Bible scholars have questioned, why is this book even in our Bibles in the first place? Since it's so different from other biblical literature and it's filled with explicit content. Why is this in our Bibles? And here's what I know to be true, that Song of Songs is there to remind us that God loves love. He created it. You go back to the Garden of Eden, the two shall become one flesh. This is a godly thing. This is what He has created. And so throughout the book, there's going to be 3 main characters that we're going to interact with. The first is a young woman. The second is a young man. And the last is a chorus of other women or bridesmaids. And last week we heard from the woman as she's talking about the character of the man, the young man, right? And this woman comments on his outer and inner fragrance. She says not only does he look and smell good, but she's also attracted to his inner fragrance, his character, his reputation. This guy's a man of integrity and of honor. And today we're actually going to turn it around and look at the character of the young woman and what's different about her. And what we're going to discover is the completion and the wholeness that God can bring into your marriage, into your dating, into your singleness, and into your brokenness. See, you are incomplete. Yes, let's establish that. You are incomplete, but no human being is capable of completing you. And last week we ended in verse 4. Today we're going to pick it up in verse 5 with the young woman talking. And this is the young woman. She says this. She says, I am black and beautiful, you daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar and the curtains of Solomon. So this young woman, right off the bat, says this. She says she's black and beautiful. Black is beautiful. Amen? And here we are in the middle of Black History Month. And this is a month where we celebrate the achievements of African Americans. From the days of slavery to the days of segregation, we recognize that Black people have been up against discrimination and prejudice. And these things, let's not pretend they don't exist today. They still exist today. But we've come a long way as a society. And this month is an opportunity for us to celebrate the victories of Black people in our country. And so as I look at our congregation, I am so proud and so excited that we are not just a white community. We are a multi-ethnic, multiracial community of people. And here we see that this woman is dark-skinned, right? And she shows this confidence at first, right? She's saying, I'm black and I'm beautiful. And that's this confidence that she's exuding here. And she's speaking to the daughters of Jerusalem. She's saying, I'm black and beautiful, you daughters of Jerusalem. This is who I am. And last week we read what this woman said she said about the man to the women. She said this about the man. She said, no wonder the young women love you, right? This guy had all the attention of all these other women, but his eyes were on her only. And now she's actually turning her attention to the daughters of Jerusalem, to these women. And she goes on to say this. She says, don't stare at me. Do not stare at me. So at first you think, she's proud of who she is, but now we start to uncover a little bit of insecurities in her. And you start to see some of her emotions come out. She seems to be somewhat embarrassed of her appearance in some way. Like any woman might say, don't look at me. I haven't done my makeup yet. I'm not ready yet. She's saying, daughters of Jerusalem, don't stare at me. What is she embarrassed of? And she goes on, she says, don't stare at me because I'm dark, for the sun has tanned me. Now I want to make this clear. This has nothing to do with the original pigment of her skin, the original skin tone that she has. She wasn't naturally dark-skinned. She's not from Africa. She's actually more Middle Eastern, from a place called Shunem, which is northern Israel. And, but she mentions this here. She says her skin is dark because the sun has tanned her, right? In our day, we're like, what's wrong with that, right? We want to have a good tan. It's a good thing. Thanks to my mom, who's, Swedish, I don't tan very well. My delicate Swedish skin needs some SPF 50 if I'm out in the sun for more than 30 minutes. I burn, I don't tan well. But in that day and age, if the sun tanned your skin, it meant something. It meant that you were marked in society as a common laborer. You were someone who worked out in the fields. And so your sun-tanned skin showed that you were out in the fields. So you probably came from from poverty. You weren't in the palace like other people. You weren't in the city. Contrast that with the daughters of Jerusalem that she's speaking to or singing to, because it's a song. These daughters of Jerusalem were fair-skinned little princesses that they grew up in the palace where daddy provided for their every need. And this young woman, she doesn't have the luxury or the wealth that these other women have. And she's starting to feel a little self-conscious about her appearance as she compares herself to them. Have you ever been there? Have you ever felt self-conscious as you compare yourself to Rihanna or Scarlett Johansson. Guys, when you compare yourself to Zac Efron or Jason Momoa, we don't stand a chance against those guys. The world that we live in with entertainment and social media is built for you to compare yourself to other people. And here's what I believe. The more you compare, the less you're complete. The more you compare, the less you're complete. You'll never have the perfect skin tone. You'll never have the perfect body, the perfect itty bitty waist around. I won't go on. The more you compare, the less you're complete. And this woman, she feels pretty incomplete next to these pretty princesses. She's had to work out in the field. Why? Why has she had to work out in the field? She tells us in the next part of this verse. She says, my mother's sons were angry with me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me caretaker of the vineyards, but I have not taken care of my own vineyard. She says, my mother's sons. She's probably talking about her stepbrothers. She says they're angry with me. They forced her to work in the fields where the sun was beating down on her, and she couldn't take care of her own vineyard, meaning she didn't have the time and capacity to care for herself. Does this remind you of a certain character? A young woman who has two evil stepsisters who forced her to do housework so she couldn't go to the ball, right? This woman's kind of like the Cinderella of the Bible. And she's been taking care of everyone else's problems and doing all this work out in the vineyard, but she hasn't had the time and capacity to care for herself and to care for her appearance. But adversity, the adversity that she has faced has a way of building character. What her stepbrothers meant for harm, God meant for good, to quote Joseph, right? And while her sunburnt skin might indicate her place in society, it has given her a humility that is incomparable. It has given her a genuineness. She's not like the other girls. She's real. She's real. She's humble. And isn't that what adversity has done in your life? Maybe you grew up poor and you've had to work in order to earn a living. Maybe it's caused you to have an appreciation for the things that you have and a humility. Now, some of you who are single, maybe you feel incomplete. Maybe you feel like just incomplete, but God is building your character in this season. He's preparing you for a person one day. And I love the way that Andy Stanley has put it. He says, become the person that the person you're looking for is looking for. Become the person that you're looking for is looking for. And that takes preparation. That takes patience. While you're preparing, he's preparing someone else as well. Are you the person that the person you're looking for is looking for? If not, keep preparing and keep being patient. Hold on. God has a plan for you. And the woman goes on, now turning her comments toward the man, and she says this, tell me, whom my soul loves, where do you pasture your flock? Where do you have it lie down at noon? So this guy's a shepherd, and she's saying, where are you? She's turning her comments toward the man. She's asking, hey, where can I find you? Because I don't want to go wandering around just looking for you everywhere. Name the time, name the place. I want to set up a time with you. Are you going to ask me on a date or what? She's putting herself out there. And she really shoots straight with him. She says, I love you. My soul loves you. But let's just be honest. Where are you at, right? Where's this? Let's define this relationship. Where are we at? And this is one of the first things that actually attracted me to my wife. This is one of the things that attracted me to my wife. She speaks her mind. She had this confidence that I didn't see in other girls. Kendall and I, we first met in the spring of 2011. And that whole summer, at the beginning of that summer, she actually kind of flippantly told me, yeah, the next guy I date is going to be the guy I marry. All right. So I'm like, what? The next guy you date? Oh, I'm not ready for marriage. Right? So I would flirt with like as many other girls as I could, but also flirt with her because I was interested in her, but I didn't want to seem too interested for fear that she might want to marry me, right? She might try to like move this along and I'm not ready. I wasn't ready for that yet. But I still remember the conversation that we had at the end of that summer. And it was just the two of us, and she was honest with me. She was frank with me, kind of like this woman here. She said, I'm going to be honest with you. I like you. And I could see myself dating you, maybe marrying you. But I don't like you when you're flirting with all these other girls. So I just need to know, just tell me, define the relationship. Should I move on? Because I'm not willing to just wait around forever. Wow, that sealed the deal for me. She's not messing around. She's marriage material, right? And so the woman goes on, she says, why should I be like one who veils herself beside the flocks of your companions? All right, let me ask you a question. Have you ever veiled yourself on a date? Have you ever lied about your age? Pretended to like a movie you've never heard of? Been afraid to tell someone that you're a Christian? That you go to church? The woman says, why should I be like someone who veils herself? Let's understand some context here, right? Women in that day who wore veils, they did it to hide their identity. And they did it for a reason. They hid their identity for a reason. If you saw a woman in public with a veil in that day and age, it most likely meant that she was a prostitute, right? And we know this from the story of Judah and Tamar in Genesis 38, that Tamar wore a veil. And so this woman's saying, I'm not going to change my morals. I'm not going to become like a prostitute for you. I'm not going to become like these other women. I'm not going to change who I am to get your attention. I don't need to flaunt myself, right? So I love the honesty that she has. And today we see a lot of women and men, but I think especially women, who give in to certain requests in order to keep or in order to even enter into a relationship. And you give in a little here and a little more and a little more, and before you know it, you don't even recognize yourself. So this young woman, she's standing up for her values. She's standing up for herself. And despite her insecurities about her appearance, don't stare at me, I'm of a lower class in society. I don't have time to care for myself. Despite all of her insecurities, despite how she feels when she compares herself to the princesses in the palace, she has a confidence. She knows who she is. She knows her values. And she knows that she's of value. And then the young man responds to her question, not with an answer, but with a clue. I love this. She asked, where are you, right? Where can I find you? And he answered, if you yourself do not know, most beautiful among women. He's telling her, hey, you're beautiful. You're beautiful. If you don't know where I am, go out on the trail of the flock and pasture your young goats by the tents of the shepherds. Like, what are you talking about, young guy? Like, what is this about? See, what he's giving her a hint. And what we start to see here is a game of hide and seek that this couple plays throughout the entire book of Song of Solomon. Right? So this guy's basically saying, come and find me. I know you're looking for me. Just come and find me. Right? Here's a little hint. And he tells her to follow the trail. Let me explain this a little bit. As we read through Song of Songs, there's a couple ways to read it. And we talked about this a little bit last week. When we read it, we can read it literally for what it is. It is a collection of songs about romantic love, right? It's literally a collection of songs about romantic love. But throughout history, people have also come to see this book as something called an allegory. If you remember that from English class, an allegory is a writing that can be interpreted to have a hidden meaning in it. And so for Jewish people, when they read Song of Songs, they read it as, yes, literally a book celebrating romantic love, but it also communicated the relationship of Yahweh, of God, to his people, the Israelites. And for Christians, knowing that Jesus is the good shepherd, as we read this, we can see that Jesus, this has been interpreted, that as we read the Song of Solomon, Song of Songs, that Jesus is the groom. He's the shepherd. He's the king. He's the person that we read in the story, the young man. And you are the bride. You, the church, are the bride of Christ. And so the young woman in this story is represented by every Christian throughout history. And though we might ask Jesus, where are you, Jesus? Why can't I see you? Where are you? Tell me so we can meet up and we can have this date, you and me, and I can hear from you and I can see you. Jesus invites us to a game of hide and seek. He invites us to follow the trail of the flock and pasture our young goats by the tents of the shepherds. We're going to talk about that. But I just want to say, whatever your relationship status, you might feel incomplete. like this woman felt. You might have these insecurities like she felt. But Jesus is saying, follow the trail. Follow the breadcrumbs. Follow the sheep as the sheep follow the shepherd. Jesus said in John 10:11, he said, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. And he goes on just later in that same chapter, chapter 10, he says, my sheep hear my voice and I know them. And they what? They follow me. Do you hear the shepherd's voice? Do you know what he says about you? I mean, the shepherd, God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, the Father, he thinks the world of you. The one who made the world thinks the world of you. You are his pride. You are his joy. He is madly in love with you. And Song of Songs paints that picture for us, just how much God loves us. And I believe that this is the secret to being complete. This is the secret to being complete. It's not in finding a mate. It's not in trading one partner for another who will finally complete you because this person didn't do it. I'm going to move on to the next person. You could search the whole earth and go on 1,000,000 dates, but no human being is capable of completing you because no one compares to Christ who completes. No one compares to Christ who completes. When you truly understand how deeply loved you are by Jesus, when you understand that he completes you, nothing and no one else compares. But until you hear the voice of the shepherd, you will forever run to a person to give you what only God wants to give you. See, when we receive the love of God, we are better positioned to love others, to enter into a relationship with someone else. Because people make bad gods. Your spouse makes a terrible god. Your kids, they're terrible gods. Only God can complete you. Because people will make you think that you need to change in order to be loved. You'll start to believe the lie that you have to change how you look to be loved. You have to change the way you look, the way you dress, all these things. You'll start to believe the lie that it's your job to change your spouse in order to keep loving them. Change the way they talk, change the way they walk, change the way they leave their shoes around the house and the way they chew their food with their mouth open. You can't love your spouse until they change and do all those things. But I think that's one of the greatest lies of the enemy, to make us think that we have to change ourselves in order to be loved and we have to change other people in order to love them. But Paul writes in Ephesians 1, he says that God chose you before the foundations of the world. God chose you before you had a chance to change. Not because you're worthy, not because he said, I really want this person on my team someday. He chose you because he wants to complete you. Not because you are complete, but because he chose you, you are complete. Because he chose you, he makes you worthy. He makes you complete. And that's the good news of the gospel, that the good shepherd, that Jesus laid his life down for you. And before you could make any changes in your life, God chose you in your lowest moment, in your darkest moments. Jesus died for you to prove his incredible, reckless, relentless love for you. So what do we do? What are we to do? We have to follow the voice of the shepherd. He chose you first. Now, because you're chosen and you're listening to that voice might lead you to some changes. Because you're chosen, you can change. Having solidified that identity and believing what he says about you is true, now you can change. You can lose weight if you want to. You can do your makeup if you want to. You can do all of those things to change your outward appearance. But the real question of change is, am I becoming more and more like Jesus every single day? Instead of trying to change your spouse, ask yourself, am I believing that God chose me and I'm choosing to follow his voice every day? Am I believing that God chose my spouse, that he loves my spouse, and I'm treating them in that same way? I mentioned earlier about the girl I dated for a year back in 2009, I think it was, 2008. I changed who I was to fit her mold because I didn't yet know who I was. Well, after that relationship ended, I met another girl who I believed was the one. And I was head over heels. I mean, in fact, I even told her that she was the one pretty early on. And we tried dating for a month, but she wasn't feeling it. And I remember I put my heart out. I put my heart on the line. I wore my heart on my sleeve. I did all the things. I was basically Jerry Maguire. You complete me, right? And she dumped me. I still remember the night, January 18th, 2011. I was devastated. I didn't understand why this had to happen. See, I believed that she was the one. She loved God. I loved God. I thought we had something. And the reason that I remember the night, the exact night, is because I actually was able to go back and read my journal. I've actually poured my heart out to God in a journal entry I wrote that night. And I was devastated and I was desperate. And I cried out to God and I asked, God, why?